everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is Libertarian presidential contender Chase Oliver. Chase, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you here, and we have a wide-ranging conversation. But to kick it off, can you tell us why you decided to jump into politics?
Yeah, well, I got my start in politics when I was much younger, right out of high school, opposing the war on terror and the war in Iraq. And so I was an anti-war activist for years. And then what got me into libertarian politics was the fact that I found both Republicans and Democrats weren't really serving the anti-war interests. And that led me into discovering the Libertarian Party. And here I am, 14 years later, running for president.
Talk to us a little bit more about that. What specifically about the Libertarian Party, what specifically resonated with you?
Yeah, it really is the message of maximum freedom for each and every individual. If you're living in peace, my elevator pitch for my campaign is really boilerplate libertarianism, which is if you're living your life in peace, your life is your life, your body is your body, your property is your property, and your business is your business. And the government should let you about that in peace, so long as you're living in peace with others.
So let's bring it back to about a month ago. You actually won the Libertarian Party of Iowa's straw poll at the Iowa caucus. How do you translate this into a mainstream primary win?
Well, what I think is indicative there is how hard we worked to get the attention of the voters in Iowa. And even though there was a negative 20-degree blizzard out there, we got 43% of the vote. And that's because we had invested time in the state and done things that no libertarian campaign had ever done in Iowa before, like speaking on the Iowa soapbox stage at the state fair, which is something only Republicans and Democrats had ever done in the past for president. So, I think it's indicative of how hard our campaign works. We have an amazing organization, hundreds of volunteers, and amazing campaign staff. And in fact, it just got us a slot on the free and equal debates at the end of the month, where, we were in 8th place and they only were going to give us the top 6. And last day, with volunteers shooting 40,000 texts out to supporters, we managed to get into the top 4, actually. So it just is indicative of how quickly we can react to these things and really do a lot with very little, because we're going to be competing against outsized resources, obviously.
Let's talk about where we are right now politically. Many have said that 2024 really feels like Groundhog Day. 2020 Part 2, we're seeing Biden and Trump rematch potentially. That's what it's shaping out to be according to the polls. And NBC News found last year that 44% of voters are open to considering supporting a third party. Why do you think that is?
You're right. It's the sequel that nobody wants, Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. And so candidates, or voters rather, are really alternative that they can feel good about voting for, and not necessarily just voting for a lesser of two evils. And I think actually there's been more recent polling that's come out that show that number now is as high as 63%. And so I think it's a golden opportunity for anyone outside of the two-party system, when we have a Donald Trump versus Joe Biden rematch, to really make some ground and put our principles forward and really grow our party from the foundational level. And I think that is an opportunity I'm willing to seize upon as a libertarian candidate traveling across the country.
From that poll I cited, there's more Democrats than Republicans who could potentially be looking for a third party option. So first, what's your pitch to maybe Democrats that feel a little disenfranchised?
Well, I think there's a lot of issues that the Libertarian Party champions that many Democrats who feel disenfranchised by Joe Biden really champion as well. For instance, we are very much about non-interventionist foreign policy, about supporting peace and not, and especially with regards to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. I call for a ceasefire, and we can't get Joe Biden to call for a ceasefire. And I think a lot of people on the left, particularly, are feeling very frustrated over this. And in a swing state like Michigan, with a disproportionately large Muslim population, that could really make the difference. And I think Democrats, if they want to earn those votes, they really need to take heed as to what their voters are caring about. And there's a whole slew of other issues like ending the drug war. Joe Biden promised to let all the cannabis offenders out and to deschedule cannabis. He still has not done that at the federal level. He hasn't expended the political capital. When there are thousands and thousands of people, because of our federal drug war, that languish in prison when they could be getting help for their addiction. And so I think when it comes down to looking at both the downtrodden, the people who are in society, as well as what our foreign policy does around the world, when we're dropping bombs all over the world, killing many innocent people, realizing that our war on terror has become a war of terror on many innocent people around the world, we address those issues head on. And I think many of the on the left, or who would be traditionally feel frustrated, and they want a messenger for that, and I will be a messenger for that.
As you noted, foreign policy really is a top issue when it comes to this election. And I do want to talk about the Israel-Hamas war in just a moment, because I'm curious what you think the response should have been. You're calling for a ceasefire. Are you also calling for the release of all hostages? What do you think Israel's response to the October 7th attack should have been then?
Yeah, naturally, I think all hostages should be released. And I can also say this policy of Israel committing airstrikes could actually be putting hostages in harm's way. We don't know exactly where they are. So I think that's kind of a foolhardy way to go about this. But yes, I would naturally want all hostages released. October the 7th was abhorrent. And if it happened in our neighborhoods, we would be demanding some sort of response. And just like I wish someone had come to us on the 12th of September in 2001 and said, maybe a global war with this kind of global reach won't really provide the stability and the justice that you think. Maybe we should be more concentrated on focusing just on going after bin Laden and after the terrorists. We should have had someone from our side, good to our ally. We call Israel an ally. We should be able to say to them, if you want a more safe and stable Israel, the policy of airstrikes and killing so many innocent people will not do that. It will only create more animosity for you in the region amongst Palestinians and other neighbors in the area. If you want justice, you should be much more surgical in your precision and going after those who have done wrong on October 7th. And I think a majority of people would support that. But what you're seeing right now in Israel is this blanket response. And even people within Israel, people who were attacked themselves, who might even know people who were harmed here, are saying this is not the correct response. And as a friend to Israel, we need to be friendly enough to say, hey, this isn't the best way to go about this. That's what friends do, is when they see their friends doing something wrong, they stop them and say, let's think about this. And that's what we should have done on October 8th, as opposed to just blanketly backing whatever they do and then saying, well, we're going to try to create a corridor here. We're going to put some humanitarian aid here while we give billions more to them. I don't think that's a really fair response. And I think there's a lot of people who are suffering in Palestine, in the Palestinian territories, because of this.
I know what a President Chase Oliver would do October 8th, but what would President Chase Oliver do now, February 20th?
Yeah, I would start calling for a ceasefire and a pullback of what these forces are doing. I would say, Israel, you need to change your policy right now if you really want to create peace and stability in the region. And yes, Hamas does need to release all the hostages. That needs to be part of this conditional ceasefire. But it needs to be put out there right now that the ceasefire needs to happen immediately so we can bring in the aid to people who are suffering. And I think that is a much better response, and we need to be a partner between, we cannot force these two sides to come together. But what we need to make clear is that we need to see some sort of movement from both governments towards some sort of reconciliation, towards some sort of two-state solution, because we cannot continue this cycle of warfare over and over again. It just is not conducive to prosperity, towards safety for the Israeli or the Palestinian people. And frankly, I'm tired of seeing U.S. tax dollars being spent to kill innocent people around the world. It is morally wrong what we're doing.
Let's pivot here, switch gears a little bit to other top concerns facing voters. They include the economy and immigration. What's your pitch to Americans when it comes to those issues?
So with the economy, I think, what we're seeing right now is the cost of living increasing. We've seen more and more inflation as we've continued to print more and more money out of thin air. And my message to the American people is simple. We have to get back to a balanced budget. When we're not printing trillions of dollars out of thin air, we're not creating that hidden tax known as inflation. It used to be a rational thing. That used to be the rational discussion we had. Now it's some sort of radical idea to balance our budget. But when President Clinton balanced the budget, we had the largest growth of prosperity in the middle class we've ever seen in my lifetime. And I don't think those things are unrelated. And so when it goes to those kitchen table issues, I'll say, hey, we need to cut government back to where it is being within its means. And that's going to require lots of sacred cows for certain members of Congress and certain districts to go away. But we need to streamline our government immediately because we can't afford what we've been doing. And immigration, I actually believe immigration is a net positive for this country. If we look at the numbers, if we look at who creates businesses and creating economic immigrants are a net plus to this country. Crisis at the southern border, but it's caused by government, not by immigration. Ability to properly process people through very quickly and allow them to come here to work, which is I support Ellis Island immigration. Come through a port of entry, have a quick background check, which in the 21st century you can do in hours, not days or weeks like it used to be 100 years ago, and allow people who are here, who are not wanted for a crime, just to come right through and get to work. and allow them to come back, maybe if they're seasonal workers in the agricultural industry, to take their money back home, as opposed to being stuck here in the border with our giant wall, with the razor wire and the border policies that we have. I would seek to reduce that and obviously eliminate a lot of these programs like ICE. I don't think we need ICE. ICE was not around forever. We had Border Patrol without that agency, and I think it's time for ICE to melt away, honestly.
I've had the privilege of talking to both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats alike. When it comes to these hot button issues, everyone agrees there's a crisis on the southern border. Something must be done about immigration. But the two parties as of now aren't doing much compromising. Where do you think, as a libertarian, you can bridge that gap?
Well, I kind of say sometimes you need to be an adult in the room. What we're seeing other political parties in power is that they are making money and they're making hay off of this issue as opposed to solving it. If they solve the immigration crisis, well, Republicans wouldn't have a scare tactic to throw at people saying, "Oh, we're being invaded," and Democrats wouldn't have an immigration policy where they can say, "Look at the Republicans throwing people in cages." Never mind the fact that Biden has continued much of those immigration policies. Let's make hay off of this. It's political pro wrestling. It's not a real competition. They're just putting up energy among their bases. And I think if you had a libertarian in office, you could have somebody who's like, stop this posturing, stop this LARPing, this pretending of politicking, and actually get down to work and sit down and solve the issue. And that's what we need. Is we need a real broker, somebody who's going to sit down and tell these, basically an adult in the room that tells the toddlers to quit throwing food at each other and actually, share and get to work. And we need that for this immigration policy because there are people suffering from this. I went to the border in El Paso and Nogales, Arizona. I saw the crisis that immigrants are going through. I saw the conditions many of them were living in. I also spoke to business owners who would desperately hire them. They say, "We got jobs we'd love to fill, but these people don't have legal documentation to work. So they're stuck here on the public assistance and on the assistance of churches and other organizations that are stretched thin." And it's a crisis, but it's a crisis that's being caused by government, not being caused by immigrants who are just coming here looking for the jobs that need to be filled as boomers retire.
After your visit to the border, what do you think then is missing from the national conversation when it comes to the border, when it comes to immigration into this country?
I think much of it is empathy for those who are coming here. I think there's just a kind of we treat immigration as some sort of like, this amorphous thing. We don't really see the human cost and the human journey that people come here to work hard for. And I think we honestly need to reconnect that back to the stories of our ancestors. 40% of the people in this country can trace their lineage back to the registry room in Ellis Island, when millions of people came here from Europe. And what were the things that were told about them? They're going to steal our jobs. They're going to destroy our culture. They're bad for families. They're going to increase crime. Those are all the same slanders that are told against really good, hardworking people who just want to their own American dream the same way my ancestors did, and 4 out of every 10 people's ancestors did during the time of Ellis Island. So I think what we need to do is connect that issue back to the greater issue of how immigration in the past has actually created a massive explosion of prosperity in this country, and stop with the fear mongering and really start having empathy for those. I imagine someone who walks barefoot across a desert to bring their kids here to have opportunity does so because they desperately love their children and they desperately want to see opportunity for them and their kids. And you know what? We should support that. That's what America's founded on. And I think if we can return to that kind of mindset and stop treating immigrants as some sort of like invasion, quote unquote, that's the scare tactic, or some sort of like dredge on society, I think we can get back to a more sensible policy and really treat them as human beings.
I do want to refresh our viewers' memories. In 2022, you did run in the Georgia Senate race, and you're credited as one of the reasons that it actually got sent to the runoff. What do you say now, 2 years later, well, really 1.5 years later, for people who say you might be a spoiler candidate, that third parties are spoilers?
Well, I have long been an advocate for advanced voting systems like ranked choice voting. Things that would allow people to put their first choice in the ballot and then rank the rest on down. And that similar to a runoff, but it's instant. And the race wasn't spoiled. The person who was leading on election night ended up winning the runoff in my race. But people got to have their say, their first choice put down there. And over 80,000 people, 81,000 people selected me as their first choice. And when I say to people who say libertarians or others are spoilers, we're not spoilers. The process is spoiled. We're candidates who are participating in the process. We have voters who want to vote for us and they want to have a voice too. The process is spoiled. I'm a libertarian. I'm not elected to office. I can't give you ranked choice voting or approval voting or something that's better than plurality voting. Only Republicans and Democrats can. And they refuse to do so because it might cost them some of their power. And so their truth is that the Republicans and Democrats care more about their power than your voice, your vote, and the process not being spoiled. I'm not the spoiler. The Democrats and Republicans who are in power, who control the process of our elections, they are the spoilers. And I encourage everybody to support ranked choice voting. There's great groups called Fair Vote and Better Ballot, and involved with them and change the way we vote in our elections, similar to Maine and Alaska, who do have ranked choice voting. We already have states that can do it. We just need 48 more to really solve this process and remove this idea of spoiling elections altogether.
To your point then, do you think that this process will ever not be spoiled? Because in the 2020 election, the Libertarian candidate won less than 2% of the vote. So do you think there's going to be a time that the Libertarian Party will be more competitive, opposed to just being seen by many as a thorn in the major other party sides?
Absolutely. And that's actually one of the purposes of my campaign, is to build the foundation that can grow our party. You know, I have 4 metrics of victory beyond outright winning the White House. You know, winning the White House would be a huge victory, but I think it's one that is less likely than the other 4 metrics that I have, which is how many states can we earn ballot access so it's easier for candidates to run, so we have more candidates running and familiarizing people with libertarianism. How many states can we get major party status like we do in Iowa to get earned media attention and increased visibility? How many states can we find electable, winnable libertarians at the local level and use this presidential campaign to push them across the finish line to victory? And then my most important goal is I want to double our party's membership this year with this campaign and hold it for we always fail at. We always have a growth in membership during presidential elections and it falls off. Well, my work does not end in November. It actually begins, because I'll spend the next 4 years making sure that all those voters excited about this campaign can get connected to the Libertarian Party at the local level, stay plugged in, and so whoever is our nominee in 2028 has a better foundation to build upon. And I really want to do that by activating Gen Z voters, because in 15 years, they will be the largest voting bloc. So it's important for us to invest in them now, so in 10 to 15 years, as they rise, so does the Libertarian Party. And so that's a huge part of running to begin with, because I do want us to have more impact across the country than just being a quote-unquote spoiler. I want us to start winning elections both at the state and federal level, so we can really be a voice in the conversation beyond just the election season, and really throughout the terms of Congress, the Senate, and hopefully one day the White House.
That's a really interesting perspective. So is what you're saying, hey, maybe winning president in 2024 isn't most important to me. Instead, it's creating these building blocks, this foundation to have a really strong Libertarian Party in the future, in a few decades to come?
Yeah, what I tell people is you know, the win in the White House is the greatest win, but it doesn't mean we can't have other wins if that doesn't happen. There's other victories to look to that build this party and build this momentum, and that's what I'm interested in doing. And so where do I place my focus? It's on those victory points, because those are the easiest to attain and really build upon. But naturally, you know, I would love to be taking the oath of office January 20th, 2025, and immediately start scaling back the abuses of the government on people's lives. You know, pardoning Julian Assange and Edward Snowden and some others instantly, right? That would be great. But short of that, I want to build for the Libertarian Party in the long run, so we can actually be a competitor in the marketplace of political ideas through the 21st century and beyond.
A big name in this 2024 election cycle has been Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He floated the possibility of running as a Libertarian candidate. What do you make of that?
Yeah, you know, I don't think he's going to do it, because honestly, I don't think he wants to be embarrassed by not getting our nomination at the convention. He frankly has many un-libertarian positions, and we've nominated, you know, two-party outcasts in the past, people like Bob Barr and some others, and they really never, you know, took or you know, they failed to launch even. And I think that's what's going to happen if he tries to come to our convention, because there are so many positions he holds, even with the last name of Kennedy, even with all the money. I think enough delegates would say, hey, we can't have somebody who said he would sign a control bill. You know, we are rooted in the idea of the Second Amendment. We can't have somebody who said we should unconditionally support Israel because we are an anti-interventionist, pro-peace foreign policy. Throw the Kochs in jail because they don't support his climate change agenda, because frankly, we support free speech and we support people's right to their own property. So I think there are so many issues where he is just diametrically opposed to our policy prescription. Now, I'll say this. I'm glad, if he wants to run, that's good. And I'm sure there are people who support him who will vote for a libertarian because they hold those positions he holds. And I think, it's good to have 5, 10, 15, people in a race. I think it's what happens in most other nations with regards to their political parties. And so, and I think right now he's learning the hard way how difficult ballot access is across the country if you're not a Republican or a Democrat. So regardless of how November goes, I hope Robert Kennedy can join the Libertarian Party in fighting for free and fair ballot access across the party and every other political party out there.
Chase, before I let you go, I am curious, what's next for your campaign?
Well, what's next for my campaign is I'm actually heading to a 4-state swing this weekend, starting in Minnesota and then going through the 3 states of Kentucky, Arkansas, and Missouri. I'm not exactly sure. Honestly, I have to look at my calendar as exactly which one's which in the order there. But we're driving through those last 3 states to all of their conventions. And we're just going to continue chugging along and getting as much earned media as we can. Thank you very much to Forbes for and just continuing trying to scoop up delegates and conventions across the country and heading to our national convention in Washington, D.C., which is going to be a great time. I encourage Forbes to send a reporter out there because unlike the 2-party system where they kind of know who the candidate is going into convention, we don't know. So it's competitive. You see that floor fighting and the trading of delegates on the floor, and it is a very interesting process. So I'm looking forward to that as we travel, but really, we're going to keep running full speed ahead. We have 6 states left before we hit all 50 states, and we are going to do that before convention. So I have the Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming, Alaska, and Hawaii. Keep a lookout because I'm heading your way.
Chase Oliver, thank you so much. Best of luck to you. You're welcome back anytime, and I do hope I can talk to you before or during the conventions. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.